This is kind of a hard topic to talk about because I don't want to make it seem like I'm this ultra nationalistic American patriot and all this stuff. I try to avoid this, but I do think that there is probably a good reason to bring this up, especially because I hear it from you guys all the time. I'm also hearing anecdotal stories from my friends. U.S. elections are very important for more than just the U.S. And I don't think a lot of Americans realize that, but for sure people outside of the U.S. know that, realize that, which is why it's kind of interesting, the situation that they're put in, especially for countries that are very close allies to the U.S., European countries, or really Canada. I mean, Canada's right there. Our neighbors too, Mexico as well. U.S. elections are insanely important for the entire world just because we no longer are, well, that's kind of funny to talk about. We're no longer an isolationist country. I mean, in a way, we've never really been a fully isolationist country. Maybe back in 1776, yeah, but after that, very quickly, we did not. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine was adopted not too long after that, really, and yeah, so then we for sure were no longer complete isolationists. But yeah, beside the point, yes, everything that we do affects literally the entire world, and it's interesting because a lot of the world does not get an opinion about this. Sadly, I mean, well, I don't know if that's the right word there. Sadly, I don't know if they. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like I said, if you're from Canada or you're a close U.S. ally, if you're Europe. You don't get to take a position. You don't get to vote, but our votes will absolutely be the top. Will be the reason. Yeah, well, why the whole world is going to be affected for the next 4 years. And it's funny because when you look at voter issues, this is never considered. Americans never consider that, and I guess I get why. Because like for the average American, they're not thinking about what's going on with France. Believe it or not. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that because I literally talk about that all the time. And I feel like, one of the only countries that the U.S. media does sometimes talk about is France, is the U.K. And there's a couple more, but it's really just a handful. There's really not that many. So, yeah, the average person down the street is not wondering how Kamala Harris or Donald Trump is going to affect relations with France or with NATO. Yes, they might be considering that more just because NATO is a massive organization. But they're definitely not considering how it will affect our relations with Australia, who's a very close U.S. ally, very close U.S. Friendly nation. But yeah, if I go down the street, they're not going to think about, do I vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump for Australia? Maybe if you have some sort of linkage to Australia, then yeah, but not so much for everybody else. Now, I do like to think about this stuff because of the very unique position that I'm in. And to be fair, there are Americans that think in terms of a global scale. It's just not very many. And the problem is our geography. I was justifying it not even that long ago, the other day, why Americans don't understand geography. And I have a very controversial opinion. I probably need to make a video about this on this channel here. I've probably mentioned it before, is the truth is a lot of Americans don't need to really know geography. And it is true that you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot about the way the world works and the way cultures work. I mean, I cannot tell you how much the information, all the information that I do here on YouTube has come into play for my day-to-day life and being able to give, just like in everyday people that I meet every day, or just being able to explain why certain things are the way they are, just understanding history and geopolitics, and as something as simple as where countries are positioned on a map. That's something that simple is comes into play. But for a lot of Americans, if you're like a nurse, or maybe if you're a teacher, you should know a little bit about geography. But if you're a nurse, or if you're just a waitress or a bartender, I think you can connect a lot more with those people. I mean, that's what I do. I use the information that's stored in my head to connect with people. But yeah, I guess a nurse is a good example. A bus driver, or just the vast majority, lawyer. I can think of all. It's funny. I personally can think of ways that these could, knowledge about geography, history, flags, things like that can come into use, but it's hard to convince them if they don't already have that knowledge into their head. So yeah, I don't really blame a lot of Americans for not understanding geography. It's kind of like if you understand where Canada is and Mexico is, then there you go. And to be fair, like when it comes to U.S. politics, those are the two countries that are usually asked the most when it comes to presidential candidates like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But yeah, I really want to make this video just for any American out there that doesn't fully grasp just how globally this affects everything. I was looking at like a top voter issue survey recently, and it's like things like abortion and the economy is obviously a big one, the border, those things. And it's funny that we talk about that stuff. I mean, I get that affects Americans' lives, but it's just funny because I hope Americans, and it's funny because the Americans watching this video very likely do fully realize the context, because all the people, I get recognized sometimes just in my everyday life. It doesn't happen too often, not flexing or anything. It just does happen occasionally, and I know that those people probably have a better grasp over geopolitics than the average American, more than likely, if they're watching my videos, unless they're watching the gaming video. But even the gaming channel has some educational elements to it. I don't even mean for that to happen. I just enjoy doing this stuff. But yeah, those are the issues that American voters have. But yes, I promise you that there are people in Chad, in the nation of Chad, the African nation, that are that will be talking about whoever we do vote for here, like 2 months away, and how it will impact them. And of course, Russia is a big one, and China is a massive one. And that actually, not to get into a completely different topic, but that probably explains why there's there's a lot of nations that have some sort of stake in one candidate over the other. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on nations like Russia and China and things like that, election interference. Of course, that's always being thrown around. But I read something that like Germany was also doing stuff in 2020, France, but those are less talked about. Those are a lot less talked about. Which this leads me into a topic that I've been wanting to discuss here for a long time. If you look at America's past, I briefly touched upon it earlier in this video. If you look at America's past and the push to be like an isolationist country, for a long time, Americans have wanted to be isolationists. I mean, just look at the 2 world wars. I mean, we didn't join those world wars immediately. We ended up joining those world wars, but we didn't do it. And there's still, to this day, I think it's just going to be a part of us fundamentally. It's part of our DNA for Americans to want to be isolationist and to completely stay out of world affairs and things like that. But I think that if you look at it from the perspective of history, unfortunately, you can't really do that. And even if you want to do that, the facts are the people in power are just not going to do it. They're just not going to do it because, maybe one day there'll be a candidate that will try to push an isolationist platform. I doubt it. Look at the 2 candidates. Look at the 3 candidates. Look at Joe Biden. No one has pushed isolationism. And if you really look at the candidates in the last, 30 years, 40 years, it's hard to even say. I'd have to go back to every single candidate, not just president. But has there been a candidate that's really pushed isolationism in the last 50 years? I'm not sure. Obviously, it was a bigger push after the Great War, after World War I. And, of course, in World War II, we still ended up getting involved. And there was a lot of funny, stories about that. The American public wanted to be isolationist in World War II. But even before the U.S. joined in on World War II, even before Pearl Harbor, FDR was obviously working with the British with the Lend-Lease Act to keep them going, keep supplies running. I don't know exactly the American public's thoughts too much about that, but they did want to stay out of it. That might have been a little bit more of a mixed topic because they wanted to stay out of the war. They might have wanted to support one side, but who knows exactly to what extent. But it's just interesting because I think that if we learn anything from history, U.S. history in particular, you can't be, isolationism and considering global affairs is kind of two different things. You could still consider what's going on in the globe and the world and still want the U.S. to stay out of it. But voting is something just to kind of keep in the back of your mind how all that stuff will come out into play. Of course, no one's really going to do that. Everyone's going to vote based off of their own personal standards. That's just how kind of it is. But it's kind of a fun topic to kind of keep in the back of your mind, right? Because, I'm sure other countries don't really do it. I mean, it's very fascinating to think about exactly how, not on a global scale, probably not. Maybe other countries will think about a particular nation, a particular probably neighboring nation, and how however they vote, whatever candidate they choose to be the leader of the next leader of their country. They probably focus on maybe one or two neighboring countries, but probably not on a global scale. And obviously the Americans don't do that. Us Americans don't do that either. But it's still fun. It's felt funny and fun to keep in the back of our mind, like, oh, how will this affect things and how will that affect things? Because I don't think we really know a whole lot about Kamala Harris and her platform towards it more than likely will be something that Joe Biden has done. She'll probably kind of just continue whatever that is. And then, that's the interesting thing about these two candidates is we do have record about how they've done in the past. Kamala's a little bit more of a toss-up, and I guess maybe Trump will have different policies flipped, but you could probably look at Trump's previous candidacy between 2016 and 2020 to kind of make an adjustment on how he's going to take each individual nation if he were to be reelected, how he's going to deal with each individual nation. He has made a couple of switches. I haven't heard him talk quite as much about NATO anymore. He did a lot in 2015. Kamala, you could say she's just going to continue whatever Joe Biden was doing, but who knows? She also might have a couple of tweaks. I think they both could have a couple of tweaks here. I think sometimes there's a push we don't know what either candidate is going to do completely. I don't think it's a complete blank slate. It's not like one of these candidates has never been in office before, like Trump in 2015. People did not know what he was going to do. That was a big deal. Or Barack Obama in 2008. He was a relatively new politician. We didn't really know how he would handle things on a global scale. You could kind of make guesses on how George Bush Jr. was going to do things, maybe he was going to follow his dad's footsteps. That's a whole other conversation because we have the story of Iraq and Saddam and all that stuff. But it's interesting to look back at the different presidents and if we had an idea of what they would do. I think we surprisingly in this U.S. election we kind of have an idea of their geopolitics and how they would conduct themselves on a global scale. Not at 100% level. Again, I do want to say not at 100% level. Both of them we don't know 100%, but there's context clues there and there's previous experiences on how they've done things in the past that we can kind of work for. But anyways, I just want to talk about this because obviously I talk to a lot of people from around the world. I've read some comments about how this will affect people that are watching these videos here on Drew IRL because I have covered U.S. election stuff here, and hopefully there's some Americans that will definitely think about this going forward in 2 months because that's when the election is.